Story continued from Utahraptor and Iguana Colossus episodes. The western United States 135 million years ago, an area of forests and floodplains ruled by the dinosaurs. All kinds of these ancient reptiles reside in this plentiful area, the majority of which are herbivores. Commonly seen are the small hippodrago, feeding on low-lying ferns and cycads. Standing slightly taller than them are the Falcarius, early therizinosaurs that have evolved from predators to peaceful browsers. There are larger herbivores, such as Iguana Colossus. However, at this time of year their vast herds have moved on, following the rains and the plant growth it provides. But there are herbivores far taller than them, which are of course the sauropods. Like Moabosaurus, at 10 meters long and 6 tons, they can feed from the very treetops. So many herbivores attract multiple predators, like the 2.5 meter Yogovechia, a dromaeosaur that hunts mostly at night, preying on small dinosaurs. Even smaller is Gemini Raptor, a 1.5 meter troodontid that mostly feeds on small mammals and reptiles. It isn't just dinosaurs, there are multiple crocodiliforms that patrol the waterways and could easily pull a small dinosaur to their doom. Then there's the region's top predator, the huge dromaeosaur, Utahraptor. Most dromaeosaurs rarely grow above 2 meters, occupying the small predator or scavenger niche. At 6 meters long and weighing up to 500 kilograms, Utahraptor are entirely different to the majority of their family. They are stockier and more robustly built to take on prey far larger than themselves, but they have kept the weaponry of their ancestors. On the second toe of their feet is the signature sickle claw, used to pin down and puncture small prey. On their arms are 3 long fingers, tipped with curved claws built for cutting and slashing, and in their thickened skulls are the deadly serrated teeth that can slice through even thick hide. But it is not their size or weaponry that is the most dangerous part of them. It is that they hunt in packs, working together in complex hierarchies to efficiently overwhelm prey, whether it be by weight of numbers, or slowly bleeding a victim to exhaustion. One such troop, the Redclaw Pack, is currently creating a plan to hunt some of the most dangerous prey in their territory. Headed by the alpha female Redclaw and the alpha male One Eye, these 2 experienced adults have been leading this group successfully for multiple years. They will need all that experience, as they are preparing to hunt at least one of the giant Moabosaurus. The Utahraptor may be large, but their targets are far larger and heavier, so for a group to hunt one takes patience, numbers, and experience. The herd of Moabosaurus have moved into the winding and rocky area of the Utahraptor's territory, giving the hunters the advantage. Having waited for a herd to move here, the pack have wasted no time in getting into position. With plenty of foliage and rocky outcrops to give them cover, they have slowly approached the feeding giants without being spotted, and have fanned out into smaller groups. Redclaw leads the large females, while One Eye leads the slightly smaller males. There is also 3 new members of the pack, 3 brothers from a different group that are still integrating into the Redclaw pack, and in the back are the youngest members, the 4 siblings. Strider is amongst them, patiently waiting and watching, knowing that now was the best time to regain his confidence with the alphas. Beside him were his brothers Roughguts and Blackback, the former restless in his hunger, and the latter easily identified by his darker plumage. Their sister Swifttail was also with them. Female Utahraptor grew larger than the males, however this only occurs once they reach maturity, so the 4 siblings were even in terms of size and strength. Swifttail had them all beat in speed however, hence her name. The forward members had steadily gotten closer and closer to the herd, and hadn't been spotted. That was until an entirely different dinosaur ruined everything. A Falcarius that was foraging through the undergrowth was headed right towards one of the female Utahraptors. She didn't want to give away her position, so she stayed still. But when the smaller dinosaur nearly walked right into her, the Falcarius squealed in shock, turned around and scurried in the opposite direction. It ran towards the Moabosaurus, squawking loudly, letting everyone know that something was nearby. The larger herbivores looked at the flailing Falcarius, then to where the first group of Utahraptor were hiding. Their hand had been forced, so Redclaw began the attack. The female group burst out of the undergrowth, closing the distance between themselves and the large sauropods. The closest and largest Moabosaurus gave warning calls and faced their attackers, while smaller members moved behind them. The predators circled the herd of 10, screeching, flapping their arms and mock lunging, trying to scare the sauropods but never fully committing to an attack. This was a distraction, and it worked. The largest Moabosaurus were concentrating on the female group and didn't see the male group, led by One Eye, flanking them from the rear. Without warning, the 4 large male raptors snuck in and attacked the more vulnerable herbivores that thought they were safe. In pairs, they jumped onto one Moabosaurus each, completely surprising them. The younger herd members had no idea they were being attacked until they felt their hide punctured and cut by long claws and hooked talons. They desperately tried to shake off the predators and called out for help, but when the large Moabosaurus turned to help, the female Utahraptors moved in and kicked the legs of the sauropods before darting back. They had to keep the big Moabosaurus distracted, so these probing attacks were meant to annoy their prey, but did little damage against them. It also meant they had to avoid the powerful kicks the sauropods could unleash, which were capable of sending them flying or crushing the lightly built Utahraptor to pulp. The young Moabosaurus weren't helpless, however. 2 of their herd members were able to get to them. The Utahraptor males were clinging onto their victims' backs, their claws barely holding on, and using their teeth to viciously bite into their flesh over and over again. The assisting Moabosaurus couldn't kick the raptors, but they could use their necks. Swinging their long necks over the younger herd members' backs, the sauropods batted off each of the attacking Utahraptor except for One Eye, who twisted his body to avoid the wall of flesh that sought to dislodge him. 2 of the males crashed to the ground, but one spun in midair and landed on his feet before jumping back onto the Moabosaurus, trying to help One Eye. From the outside it looked like chaos, and in a way it was, but backup was on its way. The 3 new brothers were coming in to assist. Far behind them was Strider's group, waiting to be called. Once one group was tired or received too many injuries, they would swap out with one another, allowing some members to rest while the pack as a whole kept up the attack, slowly weakening the herd. Strider and his siblings watched and waited for their cue, but Redclaw was keeping up the attack, even when one Utahraptor jumped at a Moabosaurus and the herbivore rammed its shoulder into her, sending the raptor flying backwards. The group of 4 couldn't keep their eyes off the carnage, but Strider pulled his head back and observed his surroundings. Something was telling him that an outside force was getting closer. He scanned from horizon to horizon, and when he finally turned right, he saw it. Moving towards the hunt, stomping across the earth, breaking through the tall trees, was the Siderosaurus. The 15-meter-long sauropod towered even over the Moabosaurus. The commotion must have startled it, and for whatever reason, it had decided to run right into the hunt. None of the other Utahraptor had even noticed its approach, despite its size. Only Strider had seen it. It was up to him to act. Strider called out as loud as he could, barking a distant call again and again, trying to warn his pack. At first, not even his siblings knew what had gotten into him. Then they followed his gaze and saw the danger. Instinctively, they began barking as well, adding their voices to his, and soon enough, the pack heard them, and at least some of them stopped attacking. At first, Redclaw seemed furious that the youngsters would interrupt their attack. But then to her rear, another female, Frostwing, called out an alarm, and as the alpha female turned around, she saw the colossal form of the Siderosaurus pounding towards them. She and some of the other seniors screeched to retreat, and the Utahraptors pulled back out of the sauropod's path. A mere second later, the Siderosaurus stomped through the Moabosaurus's herd, knocking several of the smaller sauropods out of its way and forcing others to get out of its path, showing a rare instance of agility from the reptiles. The seemingly random Siderosaurus cut right through the Moabosaurus's herd, and once he had created a path for them, the smaller sauropods followed behind. The stalemate had now become a chase. Redclaw roared in order to pursue. One Eye echoed it, and suddenly the whole pack was sprinting after the Moabosaurus's herd. Each one of them desperately tried to jump onto their backs, or bite into their legs, but the herbivores were running all over the place, cutting each other off or running into each other, and soon it became a matter of trying not to get flattened underfoot or crushed between the giants. It had all gone downhill. The pack had been mostly going after the younger herd members, but now they couldn't get past the adults to the front of the stampede where the juveniles were, and the one Utahraptor that tried got his legs swept out by a Moabosaurus's tail and couldn't get up before a second stepped on his back, killing him instantly and reducing his torso to a red smear on the ground. The only pack members that were close to the front of the herd was Strider's group. Now was the time to act. Strider barked an attack order and began to run down the hill. He was going to intercept the front of the herd. He didn't know if the others had heard him, but soon enough Rough Guts, Blackback, and Swifttail had caught up and were running beside him, following his lead. The group were closing in, and it looked like they would hit the nearest Moabosaurus from the side, but Strider didn't want to risk falling in behind them, so he turned to their fastest member. He vocalized to Swifttail to run ahead and intercept their prey, to try and slow it down for the others. He had no authority to order the female raptor, it was merely a request. Swifttail's eyes darted to Strider upon hearing him, and for once she actually listened. Tucking her arms in and lowering her body, she pushed herself to max speed, easily outpacing her brothers. She reached the Moabosaurus first and leapt forward, launching herself at the sauropod's left shoulder, sinking her finger claws and teeth into its hide and kicking it with her legs. The prey was shocked and slowed, trying to shake the attacker off its side. This was more than enough time for the other three Utahraptor to catch up and join the attack. Strider went for the rear left leg, grabbing with his arms and driving his sickle claws into the Moabosaurus's hide. Rough Guts ran to the rear and bit down on the victim's tail, driving his heels into the ground trying to slow the target down, despite being a fraction of its weight. Blackback circled around and jumped onto the right side, trying to pull himself onto the sauropod's back, where he could hold on and deliver devastating attacks. It was working. The prey was slowing down. Other members of the herd were catching up but ran right past them. If Strider's group could hold on and stall the Moabosaurus long enough, the rest of the pack would arrive, and together they could bring down a huge prize. But the young Moabosaurus wasn't about to give up. The sauropod bellowed and then reared up on its hind legs, and with tremendous force slammed its forelimbs down to the ground, cracking the earth. Strider, Swifttail, and Blackback were thrown to the ground violently. They each tried to get back up, but before Blackback could right himself, the Moabosaurus kicked him with its front right leg, sending him through the air, disappearing into the cloud of dust brought up by the stampede. The Moabosaurus started to move again, and Strider looked back hoping his pack was close. They were, but it may have been too late. The rest of the pack were exhausted, barely able to keep up with the herd, and those that tried to attack the large dinosaurs didn't hold on for long. Utahraptors were sprinters, and more heavily built than their smaller relatives, so they tired quicker. After their fight had led into a chase, the adults were reaching the end of their stamina. All hope of them making a kill seemed lost. It was now all down to Strider's group, and as the young male turned back around, he saw one of them had definitely not given up. Still hanging on with all his strength, being dragged along the ground, was Rough Guts. The stubborn Utahraptor hadn't let go of the Moabosaurus's tail, and refused to let go. As foolish as it was enough to inspire Strider to try one last attack. Getting to his feet and running after his target, Strider barked at Swifttail to follow him. The female raptor shook herself off and fell in behind. Rough Guts wasn't able to slow the sauropod down, but it was distracting it, and the giant tried to shake the pest off his tail. Strider saw a sheer face of rock was right next to the angry herbivore, and got an idea. With Swifttail behind him, he ran up the rock face, and soon enough, they were both up to the prey's shoulder height. Both raptors jumped through the air and landed on the Moabosaurus's back, with Strider wrapping his arms around its neck and Swifttail clawing at its back. Both bit, stabbed, and slashed the huge animal, but it wasn't enough. The Moabosaurus was still running, and their attacks weren't effective. Strider saw they were coming up to an incline, where the rest of the herd was going down, and he knew he had to finish this now. Using his clawed hands and driving his sickle claws on his feet into the Moabosaurus's neck, Strider bit by bit crawled his way up the sauropod's neck, getting closer and closer to its head. The herbivore swung his head from side to side in great arcs to try and throw Strider off his neck, and multiple times he lost his footing or slipped back down its neck. But he held on and pulled himself to the top, now almost looking right into the eye of the Moabosaurus. The herbivore bellowed and swung his head again, but Strider went with the momentum and spun around its neck, pulling himself up with his mouth wide open, and bit down on the top of the Moabosaurus's head, so that his teeth pierced the target's eyes, bursting the organs, blinding it completely, and causing a howl of pain. The Moabosaurus stumbled forward in confusion, approaching the incline, and Strider called out for his siblings to bail. Rough Guts finally let go of the Moabosaurus's tail, and Swifttail jumped off its back. Strider slid down the sauropod's neck onto its back, before running down the full length of its body, and leapt down to the ground, landing on his feet. Moments later, the blind and panicked Moabosaurus reached the incline. Unable to see where it was going, it tripped and fell down. The fall finished what Strider had started. The sauropod rolled as it fell, limbs going in all directions and then cracking under its weight. Muscles tore and its neck slammed multiple times against the ground as it tumbled, breaking in a dozen places. By the time its mangled and broken form crashed to the bottom, it was already dead, as the rest of the herd finally began to slow down, realizing the hunt was over and one of their own had fallen. Strider, Swifttail, and Rough Guts looked down at the huge corpse in astonishment. They were beaten and exhausted, but somehow they had pulled it off and taken down a subadult Moabosaurus. They called out to alert their pack to where they were, and that the hunt was a success. A few minutes later, the tired pack members joined them, and they seemed just as surprised as they were. Blackback was there as well, though he was injured and would need to rest for a long time. Redclaw congratulated the siblings on their success, though seemed to give more praise to Swifttail, with her being the favoured daughter after all. One Eye, however, seemed to know that Strider was the reason the group was successful, and the proud look he gave the young Utahraptor showed Strider that he had been forgiven for his past failings. The pack made its way to the fallen Moabosaurus. The alphas would feed first, and then the rest of the adults, so despite making the kill, Strider's group would feed last. It didn't matter to him. He had gone above and beyond today, and would now be welcomed back as an equal into the pack. The four siblings rested together in the shade, satisfied with their work, and would no doubt not go hungry for weeks. For now, the Redclaw pack had a bright future ahead of them.